Evening. It is 6:03 p.m. on June 11th, 2024. My name is Gabriel Harp, Chair of the Ann Arbor Energy Commission, and as Chair, I'm calling this meeting to order. I'm participating from my home in Ann Arbor. Welcome to the June 11th, 2024 electronic meeting of the Energy Commission. We will conduct this meeting like in-person meetings. Commissioners, during the roll call, please indicate your current location. Also, during the meeting, please remain on camera just as you would be visible during in-person meetings. Finally, please mute your microphone when not speaking. Public comment will be via telephone only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call one of the following two toll-free numbers, 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099, and enter the meeting ID number 956-8718-7876 on your phone. This information is also available on the published agenda in the public meeting notices section of the city's website and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 16, AT&T channel 99, and online at www.a2gov.org/watchctn. Now for the land acknowledgement. Joe, would you please read the land acknowledgement statement?
Yes. I acknowledge that the land the city of Ann Arbor occupies is the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, including Odawa, Ojibwe, and Bodewadmi, and Wyandot peoples. I further acknowledge that our city stands, like almost all property in the United States, on lands obtained, generally in unconscionable ways, from indigenous peoples. The taking of this land was formalized by the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Knowing where we live, work, study, and recreate does not change the past, but a thorough understanding of the ongoing consequences of this past can empower us in our work to create a future that supports human flourishing and justice for all individuals.
Thank you, Joe. And would you now mind doing the roll call?
Yep. I heard Commissioner Berkowitz previously mentioned he'd be unable to make it. Councilmember Rodino, let us know Councilmember Briggs is traveling. We will keep an eye out on the call-in list there. But Commissioner Colvin Garcia.
Here, Ann Arbor.
I'm not seeing Commissioner Hans, or Commissioner Hans not hearing present. Chair Harp.
Here, calling in from my home in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Levin.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Mirsky.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Overpeck.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Rodina.
Here in Ann Arbor.
And then next is Commissioner Smith. I see someone in the call in. Let me promote them and see if that's Commissioner Smith here. I know they're having some tech issues. All right. Commissioner Smith, is that you? Yeah, there we go.
Yes, here in Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Chair, you got a quorum.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as posted and a second?
So moved.
See a motion to approve and a second. I see a second. From Commissioner Mirsky and a second from Commissioner Colvin Garcia. Commissioners, please raise your hand if you want to propose any changes or discuss an issue. Seeing no hands raised, all those in favor of approving the agenda as posted, raise your hand and say aye. All those opposed, please raise your hand and say no.
Aye.
Okay, looks like the agenda is approved. Approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes posted and a second?
Move to approve the minutes as proposed.
I see motion and from Commissioner Mirsky and Commissioner Colvin Garcia, second. Commissioners, please raise your hand if you want to propose any changes or discuss an issue. And seeing no hands raised, all those in favor of approving the minutes as posted, please raise your hand and say aye. All of those opposed, please raise your hand and say no.
You're asking everybody to vote at the same time, yes and no.
All those in favor
Yeah.
to approve the minutes, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All those opposed? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Now for public input. This is an opportunity for people to speak for up to 3 minutes. If you are watching on CTN, please call 888-788-009 or 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 956-8718-7876. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. To electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Joe, are there any callers?
Yep. We got caller ending in 134.
Thank you, Mr. Lang and Chair Harp. Ken Garber, 28 Haverhill Court. This is 820 week, and this will be a bit of a rant. My apologies. 4 years ago, when Council approved 820, I spoke in favor. Here's some of what I said. As you discuss this plan, keep in mind how completely we failed at every level. 30 years ago, in 1990, we got the first IPCC report showing that the burning of fossil fuels was driving global warming and urging action. Since then, global emissions, instead of falling, have risen 60%. In the US, we've seen a 16% rise in CO2 emissions over those 30 years, and our per capita emissions are the highest of any major country and twice that of the average European. In Ann Arbor, emissions have gone up 10%. That figure doesn't include lifestyle emissions like travel and goods consumption. That's what I said then. Today, sadly, 820 is failing. The city's scope 1 and 2 emissions have risen 2 years straight, and I suspect 2023 will show another increase instead of the drastic cuts needed. There are specific failures like benchmarking and green rental housing, both of which were to have gone into effect in 2022. Gas connections to new buildings were to have ended then too, but continue. Vehicle miles traveled are not dropping towards 50%, rather they're rising with ever larger vehicles. EV adoption has grown, but EVs are not a climate solution given the high energy inputs into making these vehicles and their batteries, especially SUVs, and the energy wastefulness of moving individual humans around in 3-ton boxes. Instead, we need to use transit, but local bus ridership is barely 2/3 pre-pandemic levels. 820 successes, like Solarize, have not translated yet to lower emissions, the only metric that matters. And we don't even measure scope 3 emissions. For example, air travel is booming nationally despite the climate impact, and I doubt Ann Arborites are flying less. Yet city messaging this week and year-round is relentlessly positive. Staff believes that you can't motivate people with fear, guilt, and negativity. Maybe you can't, but we're not changing behavior now, except for the worse. The whole tone is wrong, in my view. Let's tell the public that the plan is not working. The implication that we can somehow make this huge change without altering fundamentally the way we live, including making personal sacrifices, guarantees that we will fail. Let's be the change, while taking citywide actions that are on the same scale as the problem, instead of working around the edges and pretending change can be
30
painless.
seconds.
We've run out of time for that.
Thank you. No further callers.
Thank you, Joe. And thank you to our callers. Now we'll move on to the portion of, we have a presentation this evening on the portion of the agenda. And this is a presentation on the biodigester feasibility study. Joe, would you mind introducing our panelists? And
Yeah, I'll actually swing it over to Keith if you want to do
Okay.
an introduction here.
Sure. My name is Keith Sanders. I'm the manager at the Water Resource Recovery Facility for the City of Ann Arbor. We did a biodigester feasibility study to see if we could site a biodigester at the wastewater or at the Water Resource Recovery Facility. Our goal, if we could site it there, would be to reduce the amount of solids or trucks that we have to take to the landfill, possibly reduce odors, and either reduce our electrical use by creating it ourselves on site, or possibly even making gas clean enough to put into the grid or to use to heat our digester and the facility itself. We did 2 phases. Phase 1 was to see if it would fit on the facility site because we're pretty tight and landlocked. And phase 2 was just the economic feasibility and some preliminary work. Moore and Brugink with Black and Veatch and some other partners did that. And that's what we'd like to present to you this evening. And Brian Hannon will start it and we'll move from there.
Sounds good. Thanks for, letting us present tonight. I'd like to introduce some of the other team members. I'm Brian Hannon with Moore and Brugink. We've got Kelly Place from Moore and Brugink also on the line. We've got Mark Lang from Black and Veatch on the line. Heather Cheslick from Black and Veatch on the line. And Chad Antle is on the phone. He's not pictured here, but he is also on the line as well. So I really appreciate you letting us present tonight. Joe, is there a way I can share my screen with the presentation?
Sometimes it gives people permission, sometimes it doesn't, but I just made you a co-host, so you should be able to share now.
Oh, yeah. Share screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen here?
Yep, that looks good.
Okay, great. Well, this was a really fun study, and it was very interesting to take a look at the benefits to both the water resource recovery facility in terms of solids, odors, chemical reduction, everything that goes along with that, as well as how this tied in with the city's sustainability goals. So we found a lot of cool things through the process. And we're hoping to present some of those today. This is a very large study. It's pretty technical, so I trust you guys have all spent a lot of time, reviewing the entire thing from front to back. But we're going to do our best tonight to just summarize as well as leave room for questions at the end. Please feel free to stop us throughout the presentation, ask questions along the way. We'd love for this to be kind of more of a discussion format than us just talking to you online here. So with that introduction, I'll hand it over to Kelly Place and kind of get started on the slides. I'm going to do the direction and switching of the slides in the background. So take it away, Kelly.
Okay. Sorry, I apologize. I've been at a conference and I've kind of lost my voice a little bit over the past couple days. I'm going to talk about just a little bit of biosolids basics and also provide some other general information to you. I will move through this information a little bit quickly so that we have more time for kind of the meat and potatoes of the study. So biosolids, what are they? They're generated through the wastewater treatment process. And since they're generated, they need to be managed. And the most common biosolids management practices are land application and landfill. And the Ann Arbor wastewater facility has been able to both land apply and landfill over the years. Currently, they are only taking their biosolids to landfill. Some complications for land application, it can be impacted by the agricultural schedule. You obviously can't put biosolids on agricultural fields during the winter time. Sometimes you do need to transport those biosolids a fair distance. We've been seeing that especially on the west side of the state. And it can be impacted by regulatory changes, which are definitely outside of your control. Landfill, there is becoming more and more competition for landfill space. And so there is less volume available and it's becoming more expensive. And so, as I said, down in the blue box, so currently what the Ann Arbor facility does, they do not digest any of their solids. they dewater the biosolids and transport them to a landfill for disposal. And they do need to add some chemicals for odor control as well. And as I also mentioned, they do have the ability to stabilize their biosolids with lime and dispose of by land application if they desire to do so. So what is anaerobic digestion? It is a biological process which will break down organic matter in the absence of oxygen. And some benefits of anaerobic digestion, one of the large ones is it reduces the volume of biosolids that you need to manage. And so it will divert a volume of biosolids from your landfill. And in the process, that portion of the biosolids gets converted into biogas. Biogas can be beneficially used, and which can give you either electricity or renewable natural gas. And another just benefit also of the anaerobic digestion process is that it does reduce odors of your biosolids, and so that you wouldn't necessarily need to add chemical, or definitely would not need to add as much chemical to reduce your odors. And so in the first part of the feasibility study, we took a look at about 5 years of historical plant data. We looked at the solids data, how much was being generated, other analytical properties of the solids. We evaluated population growth, and we also did a food waste and fats, oils, and grease, which we commonly call FOG. So we did a food waste and FOG survey also to determine how much is in the area that could be brought to a digester. And so using all of this information, we decided that the anaerobic digester would be 2 million gallons. And we performed our evaluation based on that size of a digester. Again, we projected 20 years out, so 2043 solids generation. And we defined a reasonable amount of food waste and FOG that we thought would contribute to the digester. And I think Keith mentioned that the site is very tight. And that was one of the key things that we had to look at in phase 1 of the feasibility study is where would this equipment fit, or would this equipment fit? And it will be tight, but we did find a spot where a digester could go. It's kind of indicated on that diagram. It is in the location of an existing gravity thickener that is no longer in use. So, yes, thank you, Brian. So biogas handling. So biogas is the byproduct of anaerobic digestion. And to be able to use it, you need to have some mechanisms in place to store it and to clean it and condition it for upgrading. And so this study looked at 2 different methods for use. So one is cogeneration, or combined heat and power. And that's shown in the top part of the flow diagram, where you need to clean it. You run it through a combined heat and power engine, and it produces electrical savings and possibly natural gas savings because you're able to capture the heat and reuse that heat. And then the second is the renewable gas option, which is the bottom line of the flow diagram. And so that takes a little more cleaning and upgrading. and you're able to produce that renewable natural gas for reuse. This is an aerial view of the plant. You can kind of see that there's a lot of stuff on here. What's shown in light blue, there's a starting on the left-hand side of the site. Oh, sorry, where the, yes. So that would be a receiving station to be able to bring fog or like a food waste slurry to the site. And then if you move along that line, that small blue circle is a potential hydrolysis tank. That is something that we've kind of placed there to kind of save space for it if needed in the future. It's not something that was included as part of our financial analysis. And then the large blue circle is the 2 million gallon anaerobic digester. And adjacent to that, that little brown box is going to be the boiler building. There's quite a bit of equipment that is associated with the anaerobic digester that will be there. And, you know, depending on the type of digester that you select, it could be, you know, kind of underneath the tank as well. And if you move, yep, that would be one of the gas cleaning skids. And just north of that would be a gas holder. And then there's a big kind of open circle next to that, which is in the very center of that is a gas flare. And you want to keep a distance between that and any buildings and equipment. And then finally, or no, I guess not quite finally. So if you're going the renewable natural gas option, you have some additional conditioning and upgrading that you need to do there. If you are going with the cogeneration, we're down on the south part of the site, and you'd have your cogen units there, and nice. It's strategically placed so that it's very, very close to the UV system, and so you would be able to use your electricity very readily down there. And now this is to Chad.
Hello, I'm Chad Anthel. I'm with Bioworks Energy, and are part of the process of this feasibility study was to evaluate the financial side of things, if you will, and that took into many different avenues in terms of existing costs and future costs, and a lot of interesting opportunities that are lying out there today in terms of government incentives and government programs. Before we get into those details, let's talk just a little bit definition wise. So Kelly already mentioned the words CHP, that's combined heat and power. That's where you take gas and create electricity, the biogas, and create electricity and also recover the heat from combustion. ITC is the investment tax credit. This is a tax credit that was established through the Inflation Reduction Act a couple of years ago that allows government entities such as Ann Arbor to actually get a cash tax credit back into your coffers per se. Very unusual. Really hasn't happened in the past that we're aware of, but something that the federal government did through the IRA passage. MIRR, modified internal rate of return. That's a way that we look at projects to say thumbs up or thumbs down. Net present value is really taking a look at the value of the project in today's dollars. RFS, Renewable Fuel Standard. This is a federal government program. For those of you who may be familiar with filling up your car now and then, you'll see this little tag on the gas station or the gas pump, and it'll say something about ethanol. Well, the renewable fuel standard is why we have renewable fuels in our gasoline, such as ethanol, and it's a requirement to have a renewable fuel by what's called obligated parties, and those obligated parties are in general petroleum producers. So federal government says petroleum producers, you shall have a certain percentage of renewable fuels, obligates the petroleum producers to find those renewable fuels, and biogas in the form of renewable natural gas used as a fuel is eligible for the RFS credit. RFS credits are really captured and tracked by what's called RINs, R-I-N. We all often add an S to it, sorry, as a plural, but it's renewable identification number, and it's a tracking method for that renewable fuel standard program. RNG, renewable natural gas. I want you to think about renewable natural gas being very similar to what you pull off your pipeline in front of your house to heat your house, or maybe you use gas for your grill or for your oven or your furnace, except for that it was produced through renewable resources instead of pulling the natural gas from the ground. Effectively the same quality in terms of its burnability and whatnot, just again, renewable way of doing it. So the financial model really is the basis of saying, what are we spending today and what are we going to spend tomorrow? And as Kelly mentioned previously, the digestion process reduces solids or reduces the volume of sludge. So when we start looking at the overall financial model, I want you to keep that in mind, that it's really creating this, what we would call difference or delta between what's going on today and what could be going on in the future with a digester. As you'll see in the top part of the slide, you'll see the capital assets, discount rate, depreciation, debt service. All these were modeled based on input from the city of Ann Arbor, as well as our experience and the team's experience. Nothing really crazy here in terms of what we're seeing in terms of debt service percentages or discount rate or anything like that. Now, unlike a lot of projects that you see at a wastewater treatment plant, a digester has the opportunity to actually generate some revenue through inbound waste streams that can be sourced from local resources, such as your restaurants with what we would consider fog, with fats, oils, and greases, or food waste. Food waste can come from your house collections, if you chose to, restaurants, schools, food processing facilities, and everybody's trying to get rid of their waste, and so that demands or creates what we consider a tipping fee, and that's usually on a cost per gallon, cost per ton. Think of it as, instead of the material going to a landfill and paying a tipping fee, it would be going to a digester and paying a tipping fee. Typically, the tipping fees are set by alternative disposal potential, i.e., what does the landfill cost, or where are they taking it to be treated today? So that's how those tipping fees were established. Renewable natural gas, we consider it an income source, because typically this gas is going to be put back into the local utility gas grid and be used as a fuel source for somebody down the line. We know that the molecules will all mix together, but because it's got environmental attributes to it, produced through renewable sources, it creates a higher dollar value, and that higher dollar value or renewable natural gas can be sold for a higher dollar value. Excuse me. Now, one of the things that's different, again, about these models is the cost savings. So when we talk about cost,
Chad, looks like there's a hand raised. Maybe you can address the question.
Yeah, sure. I missed that. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I just put it up there. Thanks. Would you be able to, could you parse a little bit the difference between the biogas and the digestate? and so I think what I'm wondering are those products sort of are there trade-offs between each of those in terms of what's produced? So if you produce more digestate, do you have less biogas and vice versa? Or do they sort of both come off at the same amounts?
Yeah,
And if so, as you're looking at the sort of income sources, are all of those sort of uses that I think you had in slide number 3 with the EPA diagram of all the different sort of feedstocks and products, are all of those possible? And that is the idea that basically these two income sources are sort of the most financially viable ones, or how does that
Sound,
play
maybe?
out?
Yeah. It's a great question. And do you go by Gabriel or Gabe?
Gabe is fine.
Okay, Gabe. Yeah, good questions. I think the biggest thing is to differentiate between what biogas is and what digestate is. So when wastewater sludges get pumped to the digester, there's microbiology within that digester, very similar to your stomach, that is going to eat up that sludge, or what we would often call food, going to the digester. And it's a use it for metabolism through the biological process. That's going to create the biogas. So what's left over, or what is a residual, is what we call digestate. So they're really two different things, just as you had pointed out. The biogas is a very, I'll call it saleable product from the standpoint of creating energy, whether that's through RNG or whether that's through a CHP process. The digestate in the state of Michigan is still to be looked at as a cost. It does have value, but it is difficult to market that value under today's circumstances. So typically when we look at models like this, that will be the digestate disposal, and sometimes we even call it beneficial reuse. It's still a cost center as compared to a profit center. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So there's basically there's no difference sort of in the amount. If you focus on the digestate, you're not going to get less gas or vice versa, less gas or biogas or vice versa is sort of the core of it.
Yeah, and let me, if I can, I'm going to kind of jump back to where Kelly was in some of her comments. Think about the material that you're putting in the digester, very similar to what you'd eat. It's energy, right? So the higher energy content materials that you put into the digester, such as fats, oils, and greases, or undigested food as compared to digested food that is really what we call sewage sludge, those other products, the food and the fats, oils, and greases, have so much more energy potential to them. So I think what you're getting at is that, hey, if I put in more of this food waste or more of this fog into the digester, you will get more biogas out, which means the ability to create more power.
Probably also worth noting, there is a relationship, because the better the digestion process is, and the more volatiles that it takes care of through the process, the more biogas you'll produce. So the better you can digest the sludge and reduce the quantity of it, the more gas you will. So there is a relationship between the two. But unfortunately, like Chad said, the cost benefits on the biogas side, there's also a benefit to Keith and his team about reducing the quantity of digestate that needs to be handled on the other side as well. But that's really more of a benefit versus a profit center, like we said.
Yeah, and I should say that when you set tipping fees, you have to take into account the cost of disposal of that digesting. So the tipping fee should pay for, should give you some income plus cover your cost basis, right? As a good business person, we want to see everything being in the black, not in the red. So cost savings. What we mean by cost savings is sometimes people call this cost avoidance. So these are things that you're going to have to pay for on a daily basis through your traditional process that's going on at the plant right now. So when Keith is developing his budget, he's got to put in so much energy that he's going to use and so much payment to DTE. He's going to be buying chemicals for odor control. He's got to get rid of that excess sludge that the plant creates as part of the treatment process. So landfill tipping fees. And then, as we just said, if you start adding some of these food waste or fog to the digester, they don't get completely digested. So there is a cost center there as well. But the idea here is that the digester is going to reduce the amount of electricity that you need because you'll be generating it on site. It's going to reduce the amount of odor control media and additive that Keith needs to add because it's a process that doesn't create odors. It will reduce landfill tipping fees because you've got less sludge going to the landfill. And again, as I said, food waste and fog, the leftovers still have to be dealt with. So the basis of the financial model were really divided up in two scenarios. And one looked at combined heat and power. So think combined heat and power as taking the biogas, using it as a fuel for an engine generator and creating electricity on the plant grounds. So it's that much more electricity, or yeah, I guess that much more electricity that you would not have to buy from DTE. Again, a cost savings. Where RNG is producing the gas and cleaning it up to a point that it could be injected into a pipeline. So you can see there's about $7 million worth of difference in capital costs between the two. And then we looked at what the O&M costs are and the cost avoidance. So in the previous slide, we said cost savings. In this slide, we're saying cost avoidance. So that's why it's a positive number, because that's a number that the city would not have to spend on those items. There is maintenance and operational cost with the digester. And so you'll see some of those obviously are greater than what's going on today. Now, that's not the entire story, because going further down on the screen, you've got the revenue from the CHP and or from the sale of what we call the RINs or the RNG, plus its energy value. So there's substantial amount of revenue streams and cost savings that really come in and start balancing the projects in the right way. The one thing that I think is interesting about this project is the fact that you see a fairly significant impact of RNG versus electricity. The main reason is for that is that the RFS does not currently accept electricity as part of its renewable fuel standard. Now that's being looked at in the future in terms of the potential, and that could actually create those two scenarios being equal to each other, so the revenue would be the same. So that would really shift things in the future, but that's not today, unfortunately. And then the last one that's common between both of the scenarios is the receipts of the fog and the food waste tipping fees. Any questions on that slide?
Chad, probably worth noting that the RFS and RNG is kind of a market-based program, and so when we did this, we based it on today's market rates, and I think we'll see further down some sensitivity associated with that as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's a good point.
Looks like there's another hand raised.
This is a really interesting presentation so far. It's like fascinating. I have a couple of questions. The first is about more like a process related question. And is there like a crossover or a sharing between the production of the renewable natural gas and then the other one? Like one can like feed into the other, or are they separate?
they are separate currently. There is discussion about, could you create electricity through RNG and potentially get multiple layers of credits? We've seen that question asked at the tax level through the IRS, and that's not been decided. I don't think that they'll allow that because it's double dipping, but that's my opinion. And I should say I'm not a tax lawyer either.
Probably worth noting that the RFS, the RIN program, in order to get those credits and get that dollars associated with that, you have to show a path from your renewable upgraded gas that's pipeline quality to a vehicle. So in order to get that, we have to show that it goes off property and somehow gets into a vehicle. And so I think that's the difference right there, is that if we turn that gas around and used it at the plant, it's not worth as much as if you can show the path to the vehicle. So that's why those numbers are a lot different between electrical generation and the RIN values.
Okay, all right. So my other question, thank you for that. My other question has to do with the fog and food waste tipping fees. At the beginning of your presentation, I think I heard the flow, the material flow would be that food would are these coming from the existing wastewater, or is it a drop off? It's going to be collected and then brought to the facility for like the fog, for example. So because it was mentioned that restaurants, it would come from restaurants, or is that existing? What's coming out of the wastewater stream from the restaurants or the commercial properties?
Ryan, do you want me to handle that?
Mark, you want to take that one since you guys did?
Sure. That's a good question. This would be material that would be collected outside. This isn't coming in with the wastewater entering the water reclamation facility. This would be collected. There are companies out there now in Ann Arbor and within the county that collect, from grease traps and various things at restaurants, and they take that material to just, to a water reclamation facility for it to be treated. And this would allow to go directly into, rather than going into the wastewater that enters the facility and then be removed, it goes directly into the digester. So you're not using up the capacity of the water reclamation facility, you're using that as food for that digester. Similar with the food waste that would be coming in, if it's collected either, as was pointed out, either from residential or from commercial or institutional facilities, that material would be processed and turned into like a slurry, and that slurry would be brought to the water reclamation facility and go into that same type of receiving station and be metered in with the wastewater solids into the anaerobic digester. So does that answer your question?
Yes, and it leads to my next question on that,
Okay.
which is then if there's a collection, so it feeds a little bit into my background with biodiesel production and having collected fog as part of that company that I owned. There's a fee that is paid for the collection of it. So then how would the cost paid for the collection of it be offset then from the production system on site here? So basically the page that lists the cost offsets with the revenues, right?
Right.
Shows that it would be a reduction in landfill tipping fees, but on the other hand, there's a cost to obtain the material and to collect the material. Okay.
Yeah. So what's happening is
Was
the
that factored in?
generators, the restaurants are paying to have the fog, the material removed, right? They're coming and providing a service, collecting the material and then transporting it away. So that firm has been paid by the, in this case, let's call it a restaurant, and they took that, 2,000 gallons of fog away. Now that person has to take that fog and manage it. They have to find it a home. Okay. And the tip fees that are part of this analysis is that home. It's coming in and going into that system. So they're paying for that treatment of the fog at the water reclamation facility. They have to pay for it at another water reclamation facility or come up with another option for it. So they're paying for it here.
So there's no competition then for fog at this point in
There
time?
is.
Because
There
back
is.
in the day, there was a big competition and there was money to be made by collecting and selling it. Yeah.
Chad, maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah,
'Cause
I think it's important. They're great questions. And do you go by Carlene? Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Carlene, great question, and I love the background that you bring in terms of biodiesel. Typically the biodiesel fog that we see being collected is from what we would call fryer grease, brown grease. And the grease trap that we're talking about is not that material. This is the material that's coming from a grease trap. It's got food, debris. It's got stuff that went down the kitchen sink, and it's something that the local sewer department, i.e. Keith and Company, require restaurants to put in their facilities to prevent grease from getting into the sewers. So it's not necessarily the fryer grease that most companies like, I'm going to say Evergreen or Darling, companies like that would collect. This is going to be the dirtier material. And we should add that the dirtier material means it's got to be screened as well. But the competition for that dirtier material is not all that great because it's got all the other stuff in it that most biodiesel refineries and refiners, they want a pure stream. That's been our experience.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. So this is just like the trap grease, the gross stuff.
You got
Okay.
it.
All right.
What's interesting, Carlene, is that gross stuff, as you said, has a lot of energy in it.
Okay. This is excellent. All right. Thank you.
All right. Are we ready for the next slide?
Yeah. Yes, please, Brian. Thank you. So we broke down the two scenarios into a little bit more finer detail because of this idea of this investment tax credit. The investment tax credit is worth about 30% to municipalities of the capital costs, So it's significant. If we're talking 40 million, I think was the original number, now it's down to, 28 million or something along those lines. So it's significant. Now there's a timeline to break ground and get that going. And this year is really when that expires, that ITC expires. But we thought it'd be good to take a look at too. So you can see that the different, I guess, financial terms for the different scenarios with ITC and without ITC. Ultimately, the project, the best resolution for success on the project was the RNG scenario with the ITC. RNG right now has so much more value than electricity. Even without the ITC, it made the best sense. So we can go into the details on the numbers if anybody would like, but that's a synopsis. The takeaways you can see down at the bottom. Electricity is pretty easy to do. It's pretty easy to implement at a plant. Provides you the electricity to offset what you buy from DTE. It also allows you to reduce your natural gas heating bill because you can use the heat from the engine, recover the heat from the engine, and heat buildings with it. We think that the CHP scenario will get more interesting as future ticks on, as time ticks on. And the reason I say that is because of Governor Whitmer's my clean or my healthy climate plan. We're seeing movement in the direction of distributed generation and this interest in how electricity is really is a fuel. So it's very interesting to see where this might go in the future for electricity, as compared to what we see today with the RFS program and renewable natural gas, RNG. So you can see that, again, the cash flows, the positive cash flows from the RNG process today are considerable over what you would see with the CHP system. And then one of the things that I shouldn't say one of the things, one of our processes that we go through with our modeling is to look at sensitivity. What we found, and Keith knows this, I'll call him lucky, the fact that he has such low tipping fees. Now that may sound interesting because we don't want to send stuff to landfill, but economically, when you look at where tipping fees are today, they're pretty low for the city of Ann Arbor. And that makes the competing alternatives more difficult because you don't develop the same amount of cost savings as if those landfill tipping fees were higher. So on the right side of the slide, you can see where we've looked at with the CHP, how as landfill tipping fees increase, that the modified internal rate of return increases. Now, I will tell you, Keith, your landfill prices are about $18 delivered. So that's that's transportation and disposal. We're seeing much higher rates on the west side of the state. Going north towards the Flint area, we're seeing $40 a ton delivered. So, that's a opportunity in the future. It's an opportunity that you don't like to see things increase in cost, but it would certainly make the projects more interesting and more profitable, or more, I guess, better off in terms of return on investment. And then the same thing with the RNG, very similar in terms of the landfill impact. RNG, you can notice that the sensitivity is a little bit flatter. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the RNG scenario just brings in so much more money as compared to the CHP scenario.
All right, as Chad and Brian have both mentioned, there are many incentives. We analyzed the current scenario for what incentives are out there. Chad's mentioned the investment tax credit that does allow you to take a direct pay from the federal government. That's something new that was implemented under the Inflation Reduction Act. And that is different than in the past. And then Chad's mentioned a number of these other acronyms that you're seeing on the screen, but one thing to note is these are current incentives, and these can change and have historically changed fairly rapidly, meaning like over a year or two period. And all we can do is analyze the project at what we know today. Next slide. So we also looked at funding opportunities for a project of this size. We think one I wanted to highlight is the WIFIA loan. That's the top line there. That is something that was implemented by Congress in 2014 and then funded in 2017. And since that time, about 126 loans have been granted for around $20 billion worth of infrastructure. We think this project has a lot of potential to be funded under that program, along with, and it could be coupled with any number of these things that you're seeing on the screen with SRF or other grant or tax credit programs. Next slide.
Well, we know that Ann Arbor has the 820 initiative, and we wanted to talk about how an anaerobic digester could fit in with the goals of the plan. And the goal was to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030, which is coming up very quickly. This graphic shows the 4 sectors of the city that are defined by the plan, and that's energy, mobility, adaptation and resilience, and resource reduction. And we talked briefly in the table about how an anaerobic digester could address some of these strategies, to produce the renewable energy or renewable biogas, to produce renewable fuel for mobility for vehicles. Digestion fits into the enhanced use of green infrastructure, creates a more resilient wastewater treatment system, and resource reduction. We talked about this a fair amount. Food waste, if it can be diverted and brought as a slurry to the wastewater facility, it will be both used to create biogas and also diverted from the landfill. And it can support composting by using the stabilized biosolids. Next slide. And these are really just a summary of the reasons, why this would be a good fit. One, and we haven't talked about it yet, but will be in the next slide or two, is the greenhouse gas reduction. We have talked about diversion of organics from the landfill. We've also talked heat and power production or natural gas generation from a renewable fuel source. We've talked about it a little bit, fuel and chemical savings, and lastly, odor reduction. And these benefits definitely go hand in hand with the 820 plan's goals and initiatives.
Thanks. Excuse me. And the last couple of things we want to talk about is what Kelly just mentioned.
Mark,
right?
Mark, looks like we got a hand up real quick.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Carlene. You're on mute.
Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry. So my question is as far as the odor reduction, if material is coming onto the location that is potentially odor producing, and then that odor is being reduced, like what is the net odor reduction in your model, your projection for this this production plant? So like how much of the odor that would is being normally produced and suppressed on the site will be reduced? You know what I mean? So like there's more material coming on that has an odor, and what will be the net reduction based on your model?
Well, one of the things that's happening is the material that's coming on, be it the fog or the managed food waste, that's relatively contained in the pipe going into the digester, right, along with the wastewater solids. The real reduction in the odor potential is because that material that comes out, the digestate that comes out, is stabilized. It's gone through anaerobic digestion. And so it's a much better product than a raw biosolid is going through, or not even raw wastewater solid that's being dewatered and then placed in a truck and being transported. That's where you're getting your odor generation from. Once it's digested, okay, and we're having a significant reduction, we'll talk about that in a minute, significant reduction of the solids. We already talked about that. We're generating biogas because of that. That material has a much different characteristics than the material that went into it. And because of that, you have much lower potential for odor. That's really what the benefit is. And the way they're managing the odor is either with, with some lime now, and then also some other additives to try to, suppress that odor when it's being transported from the facility.
Just to give you an anecdotal thought there in terms of wastewater treatment plants that we work with that treat the raw biosolids have significant odor issues because of the ammonia and some of the H2S and mercaptans and things like that can get out, and so they do need to use a lot of chemical to take care of that. The ones that anaerobically digest, it smells like earth. It's a major difference, and you really don't need to use nearly as much chemical with anaerobically digested solids.
So then the solids that also are part of the wastewater treatment would be going through the digester?
Oh,
both
yes.
that plus the additional material that's coming on site?
Correct.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I mean, the plan is all of the wastewater solids generated at the facility through the 2043, all of that material is going into the digester. And we actually limit the amount of fog and food waste that can be added, so we don't, overload that digester. And the reason that we're not be able to take more is because of the site constraints and the 2 million gallon Hanover digester.
Thank
we
you
would
so much.
definitely make sure any loading station was handled with odor control. We have carbon canisters now where we pull air from different areas that have bad odors and run it through carbon before we discharge it to help keep the odors down. Running through that digester, that carbon should be able to pick up another area, if you will. So those drop-off stations, we should be able to pick off the air in those areas and run it through that carbon to make sure that we don't get any odors off-site when they offload. I would never let them just dump out in the middle of the plant without some kind of walls or something like that. It would just be a recipe for disaster.
Okay, so two things we want to talk about is, the greenhouse gases and how this would reduce greenhouse gases. And so we ran it's a biosolids emissions assessment model, BEAM. Okay, we'll be able to talk about the results here in just a minute. And the other thing we did was Kelly mentioned the carbon neutrality prioritization framework, and we took a look at that as well. We'll talk about both of those now. Right here, we're showing two major columns, the green and the blue, and the baseline scenarios. If you just went into the BEAM model and took all of their given values and plugged those in, this is what we come up with the number. Total megagrams per year of greenhouse gases, 874. The way Ann Arbor operates their landfill and is able to collect the methane that is generated in the landfill and then utilize that, we gave it a better credit for that. Instead of being the 793, we took that to 510. Okay, so that's a significant reduction, going from 874 down to where you are right now with this, taking the biosolids or the wastewater solids to the landfill at about 591, just under 600. The last column to the right is with the anaerobic digester. That's what the AN capital D is. And then still going to the landfill. So before we go into the digester, we'd be thickening. You thicken now the material. So you can see the first row thickening megagrams per year. That stays the same all the way across. There's currently no digestion. If they did the lime and landfill, there'd be no digestion. But here we get, we're going to have digestion with anaerobic digestion and landfilling, and you get a benefit because you're using that methane that you're generating in the anaerobic digestion process. So you actually get a credit for that. Like was talked about, either with turning that into energy, one way or the other, use electricity or through renewable natural gas. Dewatering, you'll see the dewatering is lower in the anaerobic digester landfill scenario. And that's because we have less material that comes out of the digesters at digestate to dewater. Physically less, about a third less material. We're not going to have any lime stabilization with anaerobic digestion. That goes to a 0. The transportation drops significantly. Same reason. We've got a lot less material, about a third less material, a little bit more actually, of material being transported to the landfill after dewatering. And our landfill, the amount that's being landfilled, the amount that can leak from the cap and not be connected, you can see that takes it down like 90% in the landfill itself. So now you end up actually better than 0 because we get the credit coming from the anaerobic digestion, the use of that methane. So it's a significant reduction in your greenhouse gases. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but that's when we ran the beam model, and that's the results of that exercise. Any questions on that before we go to the prioritization framework? Okay. Now we took the prioritization framework in the memo that was prepared in 2020, and this is the the scorecard, I guess is probably a good term, and the way we were able to score this opportunity. Now I don't know if the pictures in the right hand column are in front of everybody for the top of the scorecard, but for the greenhouse gas mitigation, it can either be a 2, a 4, or a 6. Okay, and so that's the one where this didn't score as well as we would hope. Of course, it got the lowest of them. Okay, and that is when the action has a small greenhouse gas reduction, 0 to 2%, and that's where it is when you compare it to the overall city of Ann Arbor. Okay, but if you look at what it's doing at the wastewater treatment facility, it's significant. We saw the greenhouse gas we were talking a minute ago at going to the landfill dropped 90%. And if we're looking at transportation, that went down 35%, and the dewatering went down 40%, and everything else is pretty much a wash. Okay, so it's a significant impact on the amount of greenhouse gases that are generated at the water reclamation facility. When you compare it to the entire community, it gets a rating of 2. The other ones are cross criteria, and that one, long term, it is you can go all the way through and look at each one of them. Long term financial benefits outweigh implementation costs, and for capital, and then again for the operation, and then how much is it costing residents? Are they seeing an impact on the cost? And on the one for the relative capital, we gave it a 1 on that one, because there could be a certain cost associated with that to the residents. And you can see the rest, technology feasible, all these things we're talking about. Anaerobic digestion at wastewater treatment facility has been going on since the 20s for a long time, over 100 years. So that's not an issue. And this goes along with the current policies and ordinances that are within the city. And ease of implementation, it's an expensive project. We talked about that, but it's definitely something that's been done in a number of different locations. The implementation time frame, it won't go as quick. Let me make sure I look at this one right. As quickly as it's going to be, it will be a couple of years to get it implemented in the next 3 to 5 years. That's just the length of time it would take. So that just scored a 1 versus 2 to get it done quicker than that. And then when you get to the co-benefits, it's either, you either get the check mark of the 1 or you don't get anything. Okay. And the historical injustice and the social capital, cultural community, there's really no way to get a point for that. But when you look at the others, pollution prevention, health and well-being, reliability, resilience, opportunities for job development, preserving the resources, safety, all of those were able to score the 1. And so when you total those all up, we got the 34 points, which is 72%. And if we could have gotten, if we look at the sixes over there in the greenhouse gas emissions, that would have helped quite a bit. But, when you're looking at compared to the overall city, of course, it's lower. But we want to take a look at that because, our thought is that when you're considering something like this, obviously you're going to put it through that prioritization framework exercise to see if that's worth evaluating any further. Any questions with that? Nope. Okay. Well, then that's the end of our formal presentation. We do certainly appreciate everyone's comments during the discussion, but that makes it a lot more fun, as Brian mentioned at the beginning, more of a discussion than a presentation. So thank you for that. And I can see Carleen has a hand up. So, so does John. Great. What questions can we answer?
All right, just so real quick, there are cities that are actually doing the renewable natural gas production, and they're just feeding that right into their fleets as well. And I don't know, like, what would have them either sell it for the credits, or are they selling it to themselves for the credits? Is there like a way to do that you have seen?
So I guess several examples here in Grand Rapids. They're taking the biogas produced off their digester. They are upgrading it to the natural gas quality, and they are pumping it through a pipeline into the bus station, filling station downtown. That gives them the pathway to a vehicle. When they can show that pathway and demonstrate it and measure how much they're getting into the vehicles, then they go out to the RIN market, which are like, I can't remember, it was Chad or Mark mentioned that the refineries are required to pay them for that if they can show that demonstrate that pathway to vehicle. So the bus fleet in Grand Rapids was already kind of run with natural gas. So they're just using their own natural gas now to do that. There's other examples. Boulder, Colorado, I believe, is also producing biogas and up converting it to RINs. I think there's quite a few more throughout the country as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Murphy.
I have a host of comments and questions, and I see that we're already an hour and 15 minutes in. So I'd just like to list them off, and maybe somebody can take notes and address the most important ones in the available time. So first of all, I reviewed the presentation in advance, as someone remarked, I think it was Brian, so I indeed did that. And there's a whole, like I said, a whole host of questions that I have. First of all, the city has looked at anaerobic digester at the waste treatment plant 2 times previously. The most recent one was in June of 2017. There was a long report, 35 pages. I haven't read it, but I have it. And I hope that that was shared with the current group that prepared this study. I realize things have changed, particularly financially, because of the IRA and ITCs and all the incentives associated with that. But I was on the Energy Commission at the time, and my recollection is, and I reached out to 2 other former commissioners, and theirs was the same as mine, is that the main reasons for not pursuing it at the time were the finances were not that good, but one of the main issues was available space. And I really wonder what's changed. I heard earlier that a thickener unit is no longer in use, so maybe that's freed up some space. But I just want to share a couple of points related to growth. I read also a bullet point that there was some assumed growth in volumes that are going to be treated. But I just want people to realize there's going to be potentially a lot of growth in Ann Arbor. There's 2,300 beds that are being added at the Elbow Field dorm in phase 1 for U of M. There's another phase, which is potentially just as large. If you look at the campus plan 2030 for particularly North Campus and Fuller Road area, there is a lot of additional housing for workforce housing, graduate student housing, etc. The latest scenarios don't label them like the previous scenarios do, but it's in the plan. And then if you look at growth in Ann Arbor, you've got all these transit corridors, and there's potential development there. And we've already seen 1,300 new housing units. No, it's even more than that, but those are just natural gas connected ones that have been approved since the 820 plan was approved, and another 600 hotel units, and those are yet to go online. So there's a lot of growth in the number of people that are going to be feeding into biosolids into the plant area. And so I really think someone needs to look at the space issues and make sure that there's not a concern there. I'd really be interested in knowing what OSI's and public works positions are, given that this has been looked at in the past and having the new plan. Another issue is PFAS and PFAS in the biosolids. About 6 months ago, so I serve as the liaison to the Environmental Commission, and Public Works Department came to the Environmental Commission and got support from the Environmental Commission to landfill biosolids as opposed to putting them on agricultural properties, primarily because of the presence of PFAS in Ann Arbor biosolids. And the question that I have is, what happens to PFAS compounds when they are processed in a biodigester and then burned in methane gas? I assume those molecules, which are extremely difficult to break down, they are going into the environment, and instead of putting them in a landfill where they're contained, then potentially they're being spread all over the environment. Another concern that I have is a couple of things related to the financials. I know that it was mentioned already that Grand Rapids has a biodigester. Flint and Holland do as well. I read a little bit about the Grand Rapids biodigester. The project was plagued with a lot of delays, some of which were Grand Rapids problems, but their original estimate for the cost of their project turned out to be half of what the $85 million final cost was. And so I'm wondering what kind of contingencies are built into the financials for the Ann Arbor proposal. Another thing related to finances is I'm wondering if the RNG scenario is more attractive simply because of the renewable the renewable fuel standards and the RINs that are associated with the IRA and the ITC. Is what making that scenario more attractive? And in a sense, is that, I mean, not taking it is leaving money on the table, but is there really anything fundamentally better environmentally for the RNG scenario versus the cogen and combined heat and power scenario? And let's see, the last couple of points are, it sounds like there's just one anaerobic digester. I've read that 2 units are often used so that one can be taken down for maintenance while the other one continues to operate. It sounds like there's just one. Some clarification on that. And then I guess the last question is, a lot of organic materials is currently collected, at least from single family residents primarily, in organic carts. And I'm wondering if some of that, including food waste, that's currently composted, could feed the anaerobic digester. So I know that's a long list, and maybe you can address some of the key ones, but I think in particular, council needs to be aware of all these other issues, and these issues need to be addressed at some point. So that's it. I yield the floor, and you can maybe take Sharice's question, and then we can decide which ones we answer yet tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to go. Thank you, Commissioner Mirsky, as well. And maybe, Commissioner Mirsky captured some of this in his own comments, but I was interested in understanding, aside from the many benefits that outlined in meeting kind of the 820 goals, any drawbacks or potential challenges either in implementation or operation of a biodigester.
That's one I think we can kind of answer somewhat easily there. There shouldn't be too many challenges with the implementation of it. There's always going to be construction items and everything, to the point of us having some contingency in there. Right now we have 30% contingency in there to take care of unknowns. There's no pencils on paper at this point yet, right? So that would be something that bridge would need to be crossed as we move closer into like a design phase to firm up the costs and everything. But right now, given the level of estimating that we're at, 30% is what's in there for contingency. So there's always project risks, right? Unfortunately, Grand Rapids ran into a lot of things that they may or may not have should have found up front. But there's to your point about the drawbacks, this is done all over the country. There's multiple digesters in Michigan as good examples. There's multiple digesters all over the United States. Some of them big, some of them small. This has been done for a long time. There's a lot of really small wastewater treatment plants and water resource recovery facilities that have these. And so it's not a new technology. The operation of this and implementation of it from that standpoint is really pretty straightforward. The upgrading of the gas is being done at a lot of different places, wastewater treatment plants, landfills, some places like that. And the CHPs are also a really well-known technology and have been done at a lot of plants, including here in Michigan as well.
Real quick, if that was it, the 2017 study, didn't that look at the location at the landfill?
It did.
Yeah, we were in the middle of the major construction project. So they looked at the landfill. And then once we got that done with the RINs and everything changing, what became clear was the landfill was not viable because you're running 20 trucks up and down Carpenter to get to the landfill to get our sewage sludge there. So once that project finished, the thought was, let's do just a phase one real quick and see if you could possibly put one digester at the wastewater plant. And then if it was, take it a little farther and look into it a little deeper at those food stocks and see what finances look like. And that's what we really try to accomplish here. Now, we are nowhere close to building a digester. There's not money there. We now know that we can build it at the wastewater plant. We want to see if everyone agrees with our assessment that it helps with 820 and things like that. And then we will constantly keep looking at grants and ways to make it feasible to get those benefits. That's really where we're at. This is kind of a first cut for there. OSI, I've shared this with them. Dr. Stoltz has seen all the copies, and I can't speak for her, but I think she's likes the idea of the digester. Again, we all know that we got some work to do financing wise, grant wise, things like that, and see how the market goes. One of the other things that is not there yet is phosphorus, right? This digester is going to concentrate phosphorus in the digestate. And at some point, they keep saying we're going to run out of phosphorus. Right now, you can pull that phosphorus out, but it's not cost effective. Someday that may become, a bigger revenue stream. So that's kind of where we're at.
Commissioner Mirsky, did you have a quick clarification?
Yeah, if I can just address some of that. Keith, your memory is correct. I think the cost of trucking all of the stuff over to the landfill was also an issue. Was it just just the trucks, the sheer number of trucks and the traffic, but it was the cost. But the reason why it was put there was the concern about lack of space. And so, if that can be addressed, that's great.
Yeah, the other, real quick, I just remembered the other thing was there was two gen sets already there that can burn methane. So there was some capital savings there. Those two gen sets, they weren't being totally utilized by the amount of methane being generated at the landfill. So the thought was that digester, you wouldn't have to buy a generator to make electricity. So you could use those, but then they found out there really wasn't enough demand, and to sell it to the grid wasn't very economical. So
yeah, I'm generally supportive. Don't get me wrong with all of my comments. I think it makes sense. I think the biggest question is this PFAS issue. The carbon fluorine bond is really, it's like the strongest chemical bond, so it's really hard to break. And by landfilling it, at least you're putting your PFAS in a landfill, and you're not spreading it all over the place, and you're not putting it in the environment, and you're not putting it into the food chain. And the question that I have is, how that somebody take a look at that.
Correct. And our solids we still would put them to the landfill as far as I'm concerned, because the PFAS is ever changing, right? I don't know if when you digest it, you get any of that into the digester gas. I don't know if they know, they're studying everything. But yeah, it's Brian, and you guys, Black and Beach, might know more on that. But yeah, our goal is still reduce that volume, but still send it to the landfill. Honestly, we could land apply. We meet the state's requirements, but we know what's in there. So, we decided not to. And then they keep adding chemicals that no one's even testing for yet. So.
Yeah, and it is a question for sure. And it's a good question. There's a lot of work that's currently going on. One thing we always have to remember is that the water reclamation facility isn't generating any PFAS. It's a receiver of PFAS. It's coming in with the wastewater, right? Yep. So the jury's still out on, how much and the concentrations and what's going on, but there is a lot of work going on. Certainly can't fault Keith for being as conservative as he is with having the opportunity to take it to a landfill at this point. But that's definitely on the top of everybody's mind that's in this profession, looking at how we're going to manage PFAS going forward, because it's prevalent throughout our world right now. We're using it in a number of different applications, and it's getting into water sources and getting into the wastewater system as well.
Can you answer just briefly the one question about the RNG versus CHP scenarios? And is the RNG scenario just fundamentally more attractive because of incentives? Is that really the real reason that's driving this?
I think to your question, hopefully I understood it right. The question was it more attractive due to the IRA and the ITC? The RINs are going to be attractive regardless of the IRA and the ITC. That could give you a potential, like, just a check from the government of up to 30% if you meet all of these qualifications and do the project appropriately. Regardless of that check, whether you get the check or you don't get the check through the investment tax credit, the RNG still has better paybacks. And those don't change.
And are those tied to federal incentives as well?
There is a market for that within the refineries, and I don't know how much of that is federally regulated in that market, but there is a requirement that they provide that market because they have to meet those particular percentages of renewable fuels as part of their portfolios.
Brian, do you mind if I jump in real quick?
Please do, Chad. Yep.
Yeah, John, great questions. I mean, the RNG versus the electricity, you have to think about it as vehicle fuel. And again, the obligated parties, the petroleum refiners, are obligated to have a certain amount of renewable fuel within their portfolio. So that's how the market is created for the RINs. And the RINs could be biodiesel, they could be they could be RNG, they could be ethanol, they could be biodiesel, they could be electrical vehicle charging, could be electricity. And unfortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but currently, the pathway for electric RINs, which we call E-RINs, has not been approved by the federal EPA. If the E-RINs were approved, then the CHP would be very, very close in terms of revenue as compared to the RNG based on the sale of the RINs, the RINs. So hopefully that clarifies.
Yeah, it does. You mentioned that earlier, that that was a possibility, so that helps a lot. Okay, great. I don't have anything else for tonight.
Okay, I think we'll close discussion for now, and I want to thank all of the presenters for this. This was great, very informative presentation. Thank you for laying it out and for bringing that, and to Mr. Sanders as well. Thank you. And I want to thank the commissioners for all of their questions and comments. This has been great. We will, I think, move to a 5-minute break briefly, and then we'll return and take up commission business. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
commission business. And on the agenda are officer elections. We have potential nominations for vice chair and environmental commission liaison, as well as elections. Joe, have there been any nominations for either the vice chair or the environmental commission liaison, or expressions of interest?
I've not heard for the vice chair one. I did confirm with Commissioner Berkowitz that he is not interested at this time, even though he is not here. I know Commissioner Mirsky had mentioned enjoying the environmental commission liaison, but if you have other thoughts, I don't want to speak out of turn for you there. But those are all I've heard of.
Okay. Do we have any nominations right now, or any self-nominations or nominations otherwise for the role of vice chair? Commissioner Mirsky?
I'm reluctant to do any arm twisting, but I'd like to nominate Cherise Schmidt. Just knowing her technical background and her professional experience and background, I think she'd be a good fit. But I have no idea what her other obligations are, and I can imagine they are many.
I certainly appreciate the nomination, but yes, they are many, and so unfortunately unable to kind of step up and take on that additional commitment at this time, unfortunately.
Okay, hearing no other nominations for the role of vice chair at the moment, I think we'll table this for next month for the time being. And are there any nominations, self or otherwise, for the role of environmental commission liaison? Commissioner Mirsky?
I'll repeat what I said last time. I'm happy to, willing to continue in the role, but I'm also happy if someone else steps forward and is interested in serving in that capacity.
Is there anyone else who would like to step forward and serve in that capacity? Seeing no hands raised, I'd like to nominate Commissioner Mirsky.
Second it.
Okay. And Councilmember Dina.
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks to John for being willing to continue serving, but also hopefully maybe we'll have a new commissioner in the future that you can take under your wing and try to try to coach them into taking it from you so that it's not always on you. But thank you for continuing to serve.
Yes,
And Joe, do we need to do a vote for that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to move that we take a vote. All those in favor of Commissioner Mirsky serving the role of environmental commission liaison, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All those not in favor, please say nay. Okay, the vote is approved, and Commissioner Mirsky is the environmental commission liaison. Thank you, Commissioner Mirsky.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay. I think we'll move on now to the staff report.
It's good. Yes, and please, for folks who are here, consider vice chair if you can. I'm again more than happy to talk to people at any point about any of those commitments. Chair Harp is doing a good job being chair, but it would be great to have, one, we are supposed to have a vice chair, but it'd also be good to have someone, helping out there, especially in the case, if Chair Harp's unable to make a meeting. So please do consider, please do reach out. Happy to talk with anyone at any time. But as for updates, the main one to note, because we're in the middle of it, is this is A20 week. I've seen a couple of you at some events already, and I look forward to seeing others of you at others, as well as anyone else on the call. But we've got events going on throughout the week. You can go to a2gov.org/A20week to see an ongoing list of all the stuff that's happening, seeing the events, times, locations, all that stuff. So look forward to seeing folks out there. Additionally, some of you are aware the rebates will be coming online in early July of this year. We'll be announcing a series of residential rebates to help advance sustainability. They'll be for things like insulation, air sealing, electric panel upgrades, and appliance replacements. And do want to note that at least 50% of the rebates will be reserved for income qualified households. More details will be posted as they become available. And the easiest way to stay informed is to subscribe to our newsletter and listserv, as that's where all updates will be posted. Additionally, we're pleased to announce the Ann Arbor Sustainable Food Business Coalition, or SFBC. This is Ann Arbor's network of businesses and organizations working together to advance sustainability across the food system. The SFBC meets quarterly, providing space for business owners to gather and discuss food-related sustainability efforts at the city and business levels. The next meeting will be on July 9th from 2 to 3 p.m. and will focus on improving energy efficiency throughout food business operations. Interested businesses can learn more and register by visiting osi.a2gov.org/SFBC. That's all for me.
And Joe, if I might ask, if recollection serves me, there is going to be a report also coming on the A20 plan, is that right? In the near future?
It should be out sometime this week. I don't know exactly when that will be posted, but it should be sometime this week.
Okay. And I just wanted to highlight that for future reference to agenda items and whatnot. Okay, moving on to reports from the working group. I don't believe there are any, and other commissions. Commissioner Mirsky, is there any report out for the Environmental Commission? Oops.
Sorry, I had to get unmute. Yeah, two main topics in the last meeting. We had a discussion of a proposal to revise, it was actually a continuation of the topic, revised public street stormwater management guidelines. There's a new policy draft that was reviewed by the commission and discussed in further detail. And at the end of that, the commission approved a resolution of support of those revised guidelines. So I assume that will be going to council. And the other topic was a review of CAFO related issues that was presented by someone from the Sierra Club in the state of Michigan. And a number of issues were basically covered, including PFAS also in that context as well, water quality issues, manure gas, and at least a discussion of, and afterwards a paper was passed out to commissioners for our review, indicating that actually new CAFOs are being built in order to produce methane or manure gas for use in the environment. So it's a little bit similar to what we're talking about today. And that I haven't read it yet, but that's something that's interesting. And then there was also a review of what the legislative situation is in terms of regulating CAFOs and all of these issues. So those are the two main topics that we consider. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Mirsky. Any updates from City Council? Councilmember Rodina.
Sorry, trying to unmute here. Yes, I'm trying to remember what has happened since we last met. We approved the city budget at the last meeting at the last month, not the last meeting. And of note, we approved $1 million for a phase 2 municipalization study. We also, I don't know if this happened since the last meeting or not, we put the authorization of the SEU on the ballot. And so 2 things that will be coming forward in the future.
And Councilmember Dina, I just want to share, I shared with the commission via an email the update about the resolutions that were passed in April, also with respect to the economic development report, just as a way of highlighting those, because I don't think those have explicitly come up to the Energy Commission, but also as moving forward as thinking about how we might support city council members as well. So I just flag that here now for commission members to think about, particularly with respect to how we think about upcoming agenda topics and how we engage with the city council members and support. Great. Okay. We will move on now to our next opportunity for public input. This is an opportunity for people to speak for up to 3 minutes. If you're watching on CTN, please call 888-788-0099 or 877-853-5247 and enter meeting ID 956-8718-7876. This information is also displayed on the meeting agenda and video feed. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number. To electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone. You will hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. And when speaking, please move to a quiet area and mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name and address at the beginning of your comments. Joe, do we have any callers?
No callers at this time.
Okay. Seeing no callers, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the items for the next agenda. And included in this month's agenda were also a list of potential Energy Commission topics that we discussed in the December, I believe it was December or January meeting. And a number may have come up as well. And so I would like to open it up for discussion or comments about any pressing topics and also revisions to current items on that list. Commissioner Mirsky?
I was hoping someone else would raise a hand, but I have basically 3 things that I think are priorities. First of all, I'd like to suggest that we combine 3 topics into one meeting. And I don't know when the appropriate time for this would be, but I'll list the topics. One is that OSI typically issues a report that's also presented to the Energy Commission on the status of A20. So it's been A20 at 2, A20 at 3. It's now A20 at 4. I think it makes sense to cover that together with the greenhouse gas inventory, because that's really, as Mr. Garber said, outcomes are what count. And it's really important that we look at outcomes in judging our progress. And the other thing is that OSI now has a performance measures web page with a lot of various metrics that are tracked. And it seems to me all of those go hand in hand. In the past, the inventory hasn't been ready for presentation until August, typically because of data from DTE. So I don't know if we want to wait for all those to combine them, but I think it makes sense. They're all interrelated. The second thing that for me is really a priority is, and I've mentioned this probably now 4 times over the last year, is the green rental housing program. It was also mentioned by Mr. Garber. The program was presented to the commission 3 years ago with a resolution of support. And I know it's illegal. It's been illegal according to Missy in an email she sent me since January. But my concern is that if it goes through legal and it's presented to the commission, it will be a fait accompli. And I think that the commission should have a role in looking at the program, especially considering its reach. 50% of the housing units in Ann Arbor are rental units. So it's something that's really important, and it's still in the bowels of the bureaucracy, so to speak. And I think it's something that is appropriate for the commission to look at. And then the third thing that I think is important as a set of topics is one of the things that you were just talking about with Councilmember Adina, is all these things around construction incentives, energy efficiency, all electric construction, and so on and so forth. I think we need to look at what exactly has already been passed by council as policy and what are the remaining questions, and get input from council where the Energy Commission can weigh in terms of providing input on next steps, if any, that it plans to take. And maybe that's some behind the scenes discussion that needs to take place before it comes to the commission. But I think those 3 things rank high. I looked at some of the scores, and some of those fall at the very top or near the top of our rankings at the end of the year. Some of them are a little bit lower, but for example, the annual greenhouse gas inventory was near the very bottom, but I can't imagine that we would not consider that. That's really almost the most important thing that we should be looking at. So those are my suggestions.
Thank you, Commissioner Mirsky. Joe?
Yeah, I did just want to note one thing for the sake of transparency and everything like that. As many of you know, Thea Egerler, who's done our greenhouse gas inventory and presentations for the past few years, has actually recently left the office to pursue an opportunity that was just absolutely perfect for them. But just wanted to note that with that, we're still doing the greenhouse gas inventory. That's not being skipped in any way, but just noting that Thea is normally the person who presented on the greenhouse gas inventory. Similarly, Thea is the one who led the development, measurements, webpage, and all that. So we will work to get all that information out there and everything like that. It just might be difficult to do a presentation kind of giving that staffing, at least on the greenhouse gas inventory side. Again, that's not to say that information is not still being conducted and put out there and will be shared once it is ready. But I do just want to note that in terms of staffing, we're working to hire for that position right now.
Other agenda topics from commission members or clarifications to existing topics? Okay, I think we'll try to work to take a look at the A20 update in the next couple of months, possibly combining that with some sort of look at least intro to some of the metrics, if not a deep dive. Let's see what we can muster. And also we'll be working a little bit to try to tie in a little bit these questions of the housing and construction incentives with respect to sustainability and economic development. And I think we'll try to have some additional conversations and see how to frame those conversations, as well as other presentations as needed around those, but also what we can do to sort of confidently help work with city council members and provide the support they need, and also city staff. Okay. If there are no other comments or clarifications, I want to thank everyone, and I'll move towards adjournment. It is now 7:59 p.m. June 11th, and I move to adjourn this meeting. And I want to thank you all for participating today and for your comments and engagement. And we will see you all next time. And please, I've sent an email to all of you, so please feel free to reach out with any comments, questions, or clarifications. And I'll and we can chat further. Thank you.
Thank you all. And thanks, Chair, for your first official time as chair.